Would someone like to please confirm the minutes? Deb, seconded by Helen. Those in favour, please show. Against? Carried. Is there any business arising from the minutes that's not covered in this agenda? If not, we'll proceed to 6.1, decision reports. Natasha, do you want to speak to this?
Through the chair. Thanks, Judy. This is just a report to provide a summary of the workshop that was held to discuss the terms of reference, and it has the attachment of the updated terms of reference for your consideration.
Thank you, Natasha. Any discussion? Adrian?
Yeah, I don't know whether now is the time to talk about it, but when we did speak about having some kind of, I don't know, training about when we come onto the committee as a new person, about introducing that, because I know when I came on it, there was no training, but it's that sort of thing is kind of discussed in the terms of reference, code of conduct, and yeah, so I don't know, is that the sort of thing you can?
Thank you. That's fine. Would anyone else like to respond to it?
There was a gap. We are fixing that gap with the new committee. So as you're aware, the community representative terms are up in a month, and we'll have new community representatives post that. So we'll do that training with that group of people when they're on board, if that makes sense.
Any other discussion on this item? Okay, thank you for that, Natasha. Yes.
So what will the training entail? What will you cover?
So through the chair, with the community representatives, it's training on understanding the code of conduct and the behavioural management framework for council members that they're attribute the behavioural standards. Yes, thank you. That are applicable to them as part of the committee. So it's that governance training that the members have already received post the election.
However, what about conflict of interest? Because that's quite an issue as well.
Yes, it would encompass.
Will that cover
as
that?
well. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Helen?
May I suggest that we also give some thought in that training to a bit of a historical overview from which this committee has created, so picking up the report that set things off and that type of thing. I know I was in the fortunate position of having followed it through, but if you were a newcomer onto the committee, getting to some of those original documents, the reports, the Schumann report, for example, might be useful.
All right, we have two recommendations here. Would someone like to move? Helen, seconded by Deb. Any further discussion? Those in favour, please show. Against? Carried. Thank you. (6.2).
Thank you. Through the chair, this is a list of the items that have been accepted into the collection by council staff as per the procedure of the collection policy, items valued at less than $1,500 that meet one or more of the thematic significance requirements of the Australian, can't remember, I'm sorry, the significance 2.0 can be acquired into the collection by staff. After that, any objects are of a value above $1,500 or other objects the committee might remember staff have been unsure of, we've presented to the committee. These we were quite confident met the criteria. And so they're a diverse group of things. We're very fortunate, I think, that the community is feeling very comfortable with the Cultural Heritage Centre as it's become more and more established and makes bigger and greater connections to community members, and they're bringing forward some very interesting items. I'd like to make particular note of the family history collection. That's a big collection of books. There's 200 books, and we're because that's a large collection, we've asked Councillor Hennessy and Margaret House. They're going through those books for us and actually ascertaining whether they have relevant information to Gawler, so that we're not just accepting family history books in that may have a connection. And so that's helping our cataloguers when they create the entry, so they can give a detailed description of where that might fit into Gawler family history. And so that, and the other thing that was of particular interest was the photos of the Apex Women's Christmas display from 1994. That's when they first started the display. It's a lovely small collection of photos, but it's demonstrating the social history and the service clubs of Gawler from that period. So those are the items that we've accepted up until the end of February.
Thank you, Jacinta. Any discussion? Can I just add to the significance beside George Aldridge's name, that he wasn't just a cartoonist for the Bunyip, he was actually quite a long time resident of Gawler. Any questions, any discussion? Karen?
Thank you. F, Gawler Amateur Swimming Club Trophy. What's the trophy of 1972?
Through the chair, sorry, I don't have any further information on that. The reason we accepted that into the collection is we have no other evidence in our collection of the amateur swimming club. There's newspaper references, obviously, but we didn't have any other physical objects until we came to light when we were looking in further. We found a file on the aquatic centre and there was some information in there, but that gave us a physical object to keep with documents. So from a display perspective, that's why we thought that was an important object, but I'll take it on notice and get back to you on exactly what the trophy was for.
Thank you, Jacinta. Anyone else? Okay. So we have A through to I to move. Would someone like to move those, please? Karen, seconded by Paul. No further discussion. If not, those in favour, please show. Against, carried. Thank you. 6.3, request for permission to publish the not painting.
Through the chair, Phil Knott, who is the great grandson of Dr. Knott, came over from Melbourne to access the collection and see all the items associated with his relative. And you'll notice further on, he offered to donate an item too, which is a further report to the committee. He has asked for a copy of the Dr. Knott painting, and I explained the process and I'm bringing it before the committee. That image is in the public domain, so he is able to access it. However, he was very cognizant of the role of the committee and the centre in the stewardship of the collection, and so he wanted to do the right thing and ask permission to obtain a copy of that painting.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions? No? Oh, Helen.
Yes, I'm just really pleased that the process is working. And I do note on 6.5, he's actually donated. So I think your point of building relationships with the families of that have material connected is excellent. And I'm thankful that he has decided to support the process by applying formally. I'm in favour of doing that. Just note, small thing, the second to last paragraph on page 12, the painting is actually created of his great-grandfather, not by. I'm sure that Andrew McCormick will be swivelling in his grave.
Sorry, if I may, through the chair, it's not that image that he's asking for.
Oh, I'm
It's
sorry.
the image of Gawler East by Dr. Knott.
Yeah.
Thank you. My apologies. I didn't read with great care.
You weren't
Thank you for
just
that.
a doctor. Okay. Any further discussion? No? If not, would someone like to move those that we pass that recommendation? Seconded, Helen, moved by Deb. Any further discussion? If not, those in favour, please show. Against, carried. 6.4, conservation of items from the Heritage Collection. Jacinta. Oh, Karen.
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. I'd like to speak to it if I can. I think this is really fantastic. We're starting to understand the collection of what is in there, some particularly old books, which, you know, will one day be on display. And I really, really love seeing what you find in the collection. And I'm sure it must be quite stunning when you first find, you know, a really, really old book, one of the first books that was in the collection, you know, a Persian letter, an envelope, that's stunning, silk program. Every single item in here is worthy of restoration, and I just think it's working, and we're starting to really understand the collection. The next step will be to get the provenance of the items, which might be a little bit harder to do, depending on the item. So yeah, I really think this is fabulous. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Anybody else? Yes, Jacinta.
If I may, thank you, Chair. Just following on from the Mayor's comments, I think the committee should be reminded that in agreeing to do some conservation and stabilisation work on these items, we are making sure that they'll be available to researchers potentially in 100 years from now, where information about these items that we don't have access to will potentially be there. So it will be an ongoing development of the story of the Gawler Heritage Collection. And I think that's a fascinating insight into what we do. It's not a point in history. We're creating and gathering and collecting the history as we go along.
Thank you, Jacinta. Can I ask, have we got any further in translating that Persian letter?
So through the chair, no. It's intriguing. And I'm very grateful to the Australian Islamic Museum for their willingness to help. They've got their own workload to do, but it's a collaborative and collegial industry, and we should be very thankful to them. But no, they have not got any further at this stage.
Thank you. Someone like to move these? Oh, sorry, we've done it. Just a seconder. Adrian, do you want a seconder? Thank you. Okay, those in favour, please show. Against, Karen. Thank you.
I guess I'm coming in after the fact, but I wanted to point out, because I was having a discussion with Adrian earlier, that part of this putting the material up and getting them conserved allows us to be able to investigate them, and I'm one of the researchers together with Anne. It actually adds so much more because we are able to place them within their social situation. It's explaining so much more about the collection and so much more about the times. So I'm just reinforcing that the preservation is just one step in the process. Staff identifying the material, then it being put out for research, and we are actually building up a huge amount of knowledge and often putting up alternate points of view for further researchers to investigate. And I am particularly interested in the Persian letter because I'm not dismissing the other Dickinson. I'm not, because I know quite a bit about Herbert Dean, who also was a doctor in Angaston, and those two were, what's the term, larrikins. So I am not dismissing him out of the question. So I think we're proving, as we always aim to do, that with some thorough research, academic level research, we're now starting to, sincerely, I think we're identifying state significance, and occasionally we're going to fall over national significance, as in the case of the friendly societies. So just congratulations to us all for moving along that track so well from where we started.
Thank you, Helen. All right, 6.5. Charles Knott. Swordstick, is that his name?
Through the chair, the sword stick is the item. It looks like a walking cane, but it has a concealed sword. So as per the collection policy, items that are suspected to have a value above $1,500 are independently valued and presented to the committee. I suspected it had a value of around $1,500. I did not know that it would be worth $4,500. They are very collectible. So the interesting thing about this object, and I went into this in the report, is that we're very well aware of Gawler as the colonial Athens, the role that the Institute played. We know the founding people involved in the town, but this was the son of Dr. Knott. This was an example of what that education, community, all of those sorts of things. He went and he did very well for himself in Melbourne and became very much involved in Melbourne society. And there's not a lot, we haven't been able to ascertain a lot of information about him at this stage, but it seems that he took his upbringing in Gawler and he used that, parlayed that into a successful life elsewhere. And so I think at some stage down the track, there's a real research opportunity for somebody to talk about the second generation of colonists in Gawler. The sword stick is a good example of that, in that it was something that gentlemen carried. It was expensive to him when he bought it. It remained with the family after the family fell on hard times during the Depression, but that's the one thing they kept. Phil Knott was very pleased for us to have it. And I did, after it was valued, he didn't realise that it was of that much value either. And I did contact him and say, you know, is this still what you'd like to do? And he was very much of the view that Gawler was the appropriate place for that object to be.
That's fantastic, isn't it? Yeah, I did know it wasn't a name. I just couldn't resist acceptance of Charles Knott's sword stick. I thought, why are we accepting him? Yeah. Okay. All right. Would someone like to move? Helen, seconder, please. Deb. Those in favour, please show. Against. Carried. Are we going to get to see this at some point? It'd be fun, wouldn't it?
Through the chair, I can bring it to the next meeting. I'll just have to, it is a prescribed weapon, so which is fine.
Or a security guard.
So no, so there are restrictions on how we manage it, but we can certainly do that. No, we can do it. We just need to be mindful.
I actually saw one on the Antiques Roadshow recently, and they are, as you say, very costly now. Okay, item 7. Jacindra's asked if we would add a further item to that, just an exhibition update, because she hasn't been able to give us one. If that's all right with everyone, I won't.
And if I may as well, sorry, through
Oh,
the
yes,
chair.
yes.
Apologies, there was an error with the agenda. The items listed for future discussion are actually items listed for discussion today. It was a translation from past to current, which we missed. So Sarah's put up the ones that we are going to discuss today, and we do have people here to answer all of those things.
Oh, good.
Add exhibition to that. So apologies.
Yeah, that's why Wendy's here. Yeah. Sorry, Wendy, I didn't acknowledge you before. Welcome to the meeting. I'm very remiss. Okay, so we'll start with the updated motion list. Any discussion on that at all? No? Now, cultural tourism, who's going to talk to us about that? Are we going to go through it this way?
Yes, so it's the cultural tourism actually on last one, so it was
So
an
cultural
error.
heritage mapping project.
Yes, so I can talk to you about that one. So through the chair, as the committee may or may not be aware, or hopefully they are aware, council engaged integrated heritage services to do a cultural mapping exercise of the 3 rivers, so the South and North Paras and the Gawler River. Those areas within council ownership, so to speak. So we didn't go onto private land. We just did those areas that are council land that were accessible as well. So some areas of council land are difficult to access, need private egress to get to. So they did an extensive survey. They also did some anthropological and archaeological works. The group contracted local Kaurna elders and others, so youth within the Kaurna community as well, to walk with them through the areas and identify and discuss. We as council have been provided with a report of the outcomes of those surveys. The report is highly confidential and only certain elements of it we can actually release. due to the nature of the anthropological surveying specifically. However, we are as council wanting to work on how we can further promote the cultural heritage, the Indigenous cultural heritage that is of our area. We do have 7 scar trees that we're aware of along the Gawler River as well as at South Para. We do have potential shelter trees in a couple of locations that we're aware of, and we also have an artifact scatter which is highly sensitive for Ghana, and we will not be disclosing that location. So we have one, we know where it is. Most people probably do know, but we will not be further disclosing. But part of the process was also for us as council to understand how best for our outdoor workforce to work with these areas to protect and preserve. So knowledge of the areas we do have within council with specific individuals, not everyone, so that they know if they're going into a certain area, don't take the slasher or the mower or that sort of stuff. They may be hand maintained so that we don't disturb the culture of significant areas. So that was really important from our perspective, and it's a really great outcome that our team now understand where these areas are and how best to treat them. We're working through, unfortunately, it's a below the line budget bid for the new financial year at this point. Potentials Scar Tree Walk. So we do know that we've got, I think it's 5 in total between Dead Man's Pass and the post office along that walk, both historic and one new, which was the Scar Tree that was created by the shield that's on display in the chamber here. And that's a great little cultural walk along that we can actually further describe the importance of the river corridor, Tapapara area, the meeting places, the fact that corroboree was held here and those sort of outcomes. So we are going to be working with the Ghana community on how best to do that. They've already identified certain sites along that walk passage that would be great to have further interpretation available. We need to keep working with them. So staff will be doing that over time. It's a really great outcome of a report from our perspective. Didn't identify any new that weren't previously mapped, which is interesting in itself, any new scar trees or any new sites. However, was able to reconfirm and also map changes to, excuse me, and we do understand that a couple of the scar trees will be lost due to regrowth. So the trees are that healthy that they're actually growing over the original scars. So over time, the scar will disappear, which is just regeneration. But we'll be able to put a marker in place to say there was a scar tree here, and we've got evidence of photo evidence over time of those things. So fantastic project.
Were they Coolum size or were they like canoe size?
Bit of both. So we have some that were canoe size, definitely, but some that were for food preparation and serving, definitely, which is the Coolum size. Correct. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it also is great from reaffirms what council has actually been doing within its biodiversity and stripping out weeds within the river corridor to promote tree health. To have those grow over is a fantastic outcome from that perspective. And we'll just need to pinpoint those points in time around that story. Something we want to future develop. Excuse me, it does take some resourcing, which is what we'll hopefully build into future budgets.
Thank you, David. No, somebody who has been taking some interest to council for a while. No, I hadn't heard of that. I came across it by reading some of the council's reports, and it was only ever mentioned very briefly. So while I had an understanding that there would be some sensitivity, I think it's a great news story, and I think we should continue to promote it appropriately. I think the community understands exactly what you've said, but I still think it's worth sharing that information. And in terms of the Scar Tree Walk, Scar Tree, I've written, sorry, that's my handwriting. Hopefully, while it might not get through this budget, hopefully it's in a situation ready desk ready so that whether that some grants could be available, we can progress that, because I think that fits under cultural tourism in a big way. And I'm quite sure that if we're prepared, we can grab something and move that forward.
Thank you, Helen. Deb and then Paul.
I just want to confirm what I was thinking the same thing, Helen. I think it really fits tightly into that cultural tourism, and it'll be great to see that fully developed over time and sensitively as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's good that we're just going to focus on the scar trees and nothing else, because potentially those areas can be desecrated. And for me, those sites are not commodities, and that's a really concern for me, that they're not, commoditized. But but those scar trees are probably okay because they're there and you can see them and probably relatively safe.
Karen?
Yeah, there was a scar tree cut down a couple of years ago when a lot of dead trees were cut down, and that was really quite offensive to the Aboriginal community. And we did publicise that, and we didn't know who was responsible. I don't think we ever found out who was responsible. So people do attack things, so we do need to be careful about how we manage the cultural tourism opportunity. It is a cultural tourism opportunity, but I think, working with the Kaurna people will allow us to do that sensitively. But we need to be aware, as you said, Paul, that there are people out there that want to destroy stuff, and that has actually happened. So I think that it'd be really nice if the elected members were updated on this. This is the first time I've heard of it as mayor, and I would have liked to have had a bit of a briefing prior, but I guess it is what it is. But it would be nice for the elected members to be updated on this.
Thanks, Karen. Paul and then Deb.
I just want to talk about something that happened to me once. I was working for Aboriginal organisations, and there was a sacred tree that was actually damaged deliberately, ring barked, and I was brought in as an arborist to try to save it, and I couldn't save it. And the custodian of that tree said, well, that is part of me, and it actually was like a death to him. It was just so sad. So I think you have to be very careful. And I couldn't do anything to save the tree because it had gone too far. So we have to be very careful. That's all.
I don't know how much this will add, but there was some very sad news this week. I caught it on the ABC driving to work. A very precious rock hearts up in Northern Territory were destroyed and are unable to be, restored in any way because of the sensitivity of the rock and so on. So it does happen, but it's also really important. It's a big debate. I agree. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. All right, we will move on to the update to Cultural Heritage Walk signage.
Through the chair, we have been renewing the Cultural Walk signage around town, so the committee be aware that they've been in place for a long time. They're at various sites around town. They formed at one stage a complete walk. A couple of them had been damaged over time and they no longer form the complete walk. In that process, we reviewed some of the language that was used on the Kaurna signs and realised that it was of the time that they were made, but it was outdated. And so our community officer, Linda Weiss, has worked with the Reconciliation Action Plan Group, and they reworded that sign. The other signs are as they were, but that sign and the River Red Gum sign, which again alludes slightly to the Aboriginal community, have been reworded. That went to Kumakaru for approval. That approval has come through. So it's taken a while for that process to work, but it has come through. We've got the sign authorised and it's off being manufactured at the moment. The sign makers, as many people in construction, were having trouble getting materials, but I believe that is due for installation at any point in time now.
Can I just ask, is there a Gawler language translation of the sign on it?
So through the chair, there's Ghana on one of the signs with an English translation with it.
I know that there's been some work done on dual naming of our parks with Ghana. Do we know where that's up to?
So through the chair, it's in its early stages. We've been working with the Reconciliation Action Plan Working Group and Kumakaru on the potentials. I believe that Linda's doing a reconciliation report to the May CCS meeting, so there's probably going to be further updates in that report.
Any further discussion on this item? If not, we'll go to Walker Place artifacts. Who's going to bring? Wendy, thank you.
So through the chair, thank you so much for letting me attend your meeting today. I'm going to start by saying, I guess people are wondering where these embedded artifacts are, because it is 2 years on since we actually engaged the artist. So it's Artisan Artifacts who's doing the work for us. So Jason is a sole trader. This is his business to the side. It's one of his little passions. The reason they're not in yet is because they're still not complete, because it's been very complicated and Jason's had endless problems with resins and having the exact right environmental temperatures to get them to set. He has just gotten a different type of resin in from the States, which was all very delayed and I don't know, some sort of chaotic COVID situation apparently. So he's trying again with a different type of resin to try and get them done. There are a couple of other artists that we could go to if we don't get any progression through Jason. But given he has done the very intricate measuring and the complex setting for what are very different, every artifact is so different in shape and every little bollard top has its own very specific measurements, despite them being, you know, to a standard design. So Jason's been working within all of that and he has all those details. So I'm keen to keep progressing with Jason and give him the time to get it done perfectly.
Thank you, Wendy. Karen, and then was somebody else hand up? No.
Yeah, so I
Karen.
was the one that brought this up because it has been 2 years and we haven't heard anything about the artifacts. So thank you for that update. Any idea of timelines?
Through the chair, look, Jason hasn't responded to my last couple of calls, so I don't have a time frame. All I can do is commit to keep trying to push him to actually deliver the final product.
Any further discussion? No?
Yeah, no,
Helen?
thank you, Chair. I understand and I'm cognizant of all the problems that have occurred with COVID, but I think we need to set a timeline to perhaps encourage the gentleman to continue. So perhaps we should ask, being reasonable, perhaps, where are we now? April, perhaps within 6 months, we expect it to be finished would be, I think, generous and realistic, but does set a timeline to say that we want to see it happen. How does everyone else feel?
I've only got concerns about the resin side of things, knowing a little bit about resin and whatever. I think it's a lot to do with the temperature, the ambient temperature, and now we're going into the winter. That may not be able to. That's the problem. That resin people tell me it's about the temperature.
Through the chair, following up on that, it's the temperature and the humidity in particular, and that seems to have been one of the big problems with the resin he was initially working with.
Well, perhaps then by the end of the year, would that allow us to, I mean, we've got to come to a point at which we say, if you can't achieve it, it was part of the deal. And there is still interest in the community to see that. So I think.
Wendy, did you want to respond to those suggestions that have been made?
Through the chair, look, I think saying that it needs to be done by the beginning of December 2023 gives enough different weather climatic patterns for him to work through. And sometimes giving a final deadline is when you get the action to occur. So I do take that on board. It's not that we haven't kept progressing with him. I guess we've tried to be exercise patience given the bespoke nature of this particular project.
If I may, yeah, I agree. I think we do need a timeline, and I think that it is quite reasonable towards the end of the year. I agree with that. Different temperatures. I don't know anything about residents, so I'll take your understanding of those complexities. But yeah, by the end of the year, it will be nearly 3 years, and really, that's long enough. That is way long enough to be waiting for something, you know, and I appreciate that there has been some difficulties. However, I think that's reasonable. So it might be a motion without notice that you might want to move, Councillor Hennessy, at the appropriate time.
Just noted that we've minuted that we were asking Wendy to provide an update on the progress and delays. Now, do you want to make that into a motion? That point under 7.4? Okay, all right. Yes, motions without notice. All right. So just note what's been minuted there as a form to produce a motion further down the track. Jacinta, an exhibition update.
Thank you. Through the chair, as was in the email I sent out to the committee, we will be opening the exhibition on May the 10th. It's a little later than we'd hoped, but it was very difficult to find times that would fit in with all of the key people involved. And it's increasingly hard to find a night when the Civic Centre is empty these days. So it's a nice problem for us to have, but it's really challenging. We are a very active building. So we will open then. I'm pleased to say that in the exhibition, we have borrowed some equipment from the History Trust that Charles Todd bought out when he set up the Telegraph. So that's a bit of a coup. We also have a silver trowel that Mayor Mitchell used to lay the foundation stone of the post office. We have lots of interesting things in the exhibition. At the opening, I'll be asking the Mayor to speak, as is our tradition. Martin Walker, who has been an integral part of this exhibition, will also speak. And I did ask Vicky Brady, who's the CEO of Telstra, to formally open the exhibition. She was unable to, but she did ask if she could send a delegate. And so we have Michael Patterson, who's the Regional General Manager of Telstra South Australia, Tasmania, who will formally open the exhibition for us. So it should be a good night. I hope it's in everybody's diaries. Now, if I could have some feedback, please. I've just had an email from Richard, and if we remember the plan, we had a phone box in the cafe space, and that was going to be hooked up to the gallery. People could make magneto phone calls. He's got concerned now that because it will, if people are in the gallery, it will ring the phone box, that it might drive everyone in this, and he's only just thought of this, that it might drive everyone in the cafe nutty. Could I just have your thoughts on whether that's, because his thought then is to move it into the gallery. I think that makes it too crowded in the gallery.
Deb.
I think you could put some times that it's allowed. And just even put people going through the exhibition right down. And so that may be a bother because you've got to monitor it, but I think some sort of timetable or timing or restricted hours where you can turn it on and off.
Helen?
Or just turn the volume down to make it like a burring rather than a full ring. I've got no problems. At least it will draw attention to what it is and therefore draw people into the exhibition. So I think we should probably give it a go.
Put a little apology notice on the door. So if we're very sorry, but this is part of an exhibition, we hope you don't mind, etc., etc. Oh. I have to tell you, there's some fantastic email letters in this. I'm totally unbiased. Any other discussion on, sorry, Jacinta?
If I may just, if I may, Chair, I just also wanted to alert the committee to some very good news. And that is that our Heritage Research and Collections Officer, Petra Brown, was awarded a bursary to attend the Australian Museums and Galleries Conference in Newcastle. So she'll be heading up there in May to represent the Cultural Heritage Centre. So well done. The judges were very clear that they thought it was a particularly high quality application. So I'd like to congratulate Petra, and I'm really looking forward to what she brings back from that to all of our volunteers and our team at the Cultural Heritage Centre.
I think we should send her a card from this committee and I'll organise that and bring it in. When's she leaving?
The conference starts on May the 16th, and she'll be leaving a couple of days before then to make
So
her
I'll
way
bring
up there.
something in before.
Thank
Okay,
you.
will do. Right. Card for Petra. Okay. Items listed for discussion at future meetings. Do we have to move something on that? Well, we've got the motion coming up, haven't we? So is there anything under that items listed for future meetings that we need to put in? Apart from our workshop, I guess, which will happen, won't it, at some point? The workshop for new members of the committee. Yeah, so an item for future discussion would be mandatory training for setting a date and content and stuff. Yeah. Okay. Any questions without notice? Adrian.
I don't know whether it's appropriate, but I've been following what's going on at Pioneer Park. I wonder if there's anybody that can talk about it. Or because
Wendy, you're on.
Thank you for that, Adrian. So there has been a lot of action happening around Pioneer Park over the last 2 weeks. So look, it has taken, again, it's one of these things that has taken a lot of time, but we have been working with Emeritus Professor Margie Frenenberg from the University of Adelaide and a group of his honours students, I think they're honours PhD students. And he's helping us with the archaeological supervision for any investigations that we do in Pioneer Park, it being a heritage site and obviously a heritage cemetery area. So the way this process is working is we have got engineers off to one side, working on what potential options there are to provide the structural stability for the wall in the future. And we're trying to look at different options that, well, one, that manage cost, and two, that manage the amount of excavation that we have to do behind the wall. Because the more we excavate, obviously, the more difficult it is. We're not allowed to turn any dirt without an archaeologist on site. So the engineers are off doing that to one side, but to help them understand some of the constraints, we've had Professor Frenenberg out, and we've done a preliminary scrape. So that's what you would have observed last week. So one of our civil team, one of our most skilled civil team operators was out there doing the digging. There was also quite a bit of manual digging as well. And the professor and his students would then go through what had been dug out. And I think Jacinta might be the better person to tell about what they found, which was all quite exciting. And look, sometimes when you work with universities, the academic process does have its own time bounds. However, in this case, given the significance of this area, I think it's actually a real coup for the town of Gawler to be working with Adelaide University, because what they're going to uncover is actually going to help us understand the history of our town even better. Obviously, there's a huge amount of sensitivity that we need to exercise while we're doing any of the digging. So we've done the scrape. The professor's coming back in the next couple of weeks just to do some tidying up around the edges and to try and tie some stuff in with the mayor for that, because I think it's really interesting for the rest of our community to be informed about what's going on in this project as well. It's like a positive byproduct of what is actually quite a difficult project. with what they have been finding out, that's going to be fed back to the design engineers, and we will come back to council with a report on what the options are and the estimated costs of doing that. When we have got agreement from council to go out and do the structural restoration work, we'll also include the scope to do a tidy up of the McKinley Monument as well. Structurally, that's actually quite sound, but it does need a bit of a clean. So we'll include that into that specification. But the timing of that, I can't, again, I know everyone would love me to say we're going to do it by the 28th of June, but I just can't guarantee that. It's not only in terms of the approval, the design being complete and council approval, it's then in terms of the access to contractors who can do the work in the sensitive environment that we need to work in. But I, like everyone in Gawler, is a bit sick of seeing the temporary wall in front of the true beautiful stone wall and the bunting. So we are trying to get it done as quick as we can. But Jacinta, shall I hand over to you for what you found in the dig?
Thank you, Wendy. So through the chair, what with the team from the University of Adelaide, when they're finding objects within the dig, they're handing them over to the Gawler Heritage Collection. So the objects that they have found so far are a metal digging stick that was used to make a grave, a few nails, horseshoe, the top of a knife as well. So these items we're all collecting as one. We can take them to be analysed by Art Lab at a future date. The digging stick is particularly interesting because it may have come from one of our foundries, and apparently foundries have an iron ore signature, and they can, so they can potentially locate it within one of our foundries. So those sorts of objects that are not directly associated with any particular grave, they're handing over to the Gawler Heritage Collection, and we have those at the moment.
Helen and then Karen.
Wendy, the late and great Brian Tom thanks you from the bottom of his heart for the restoration of the McKinley, which is a long-standing passion of his. So that's another positive outcome. As I was saying to a couple of people earlier, I've gone down the rabbit hole of looking at the Pioneer Park and a lot of details that have been hanging out there for a while and trying to put it into context. And hopefully that will add to the project as well, because there are far more than 470 people buried up there, and understanding why we don't have those records is really important. And the fact, and I think that for me the crux of the matter is it's sacred ground, it's consecrated ground, and 19th century sensibilities weren't fussed with relocating bodies. In England, the grave diggers of the very small cemeteries, and this isn't just 19th century, that go back 400 or 500 years, in digging a new grave would often locate bones, and they would then relocate them into the same cemetery. So the fact that it's a bit chaotic, it's certainly unmapped, it never was a mapped, and we have poor records, is adding to the story. So I'm enjoying it. I've got a few other things I'm supposed to be working on, but hopefully that will be contributed. Yeah.
I actually think this is an exceptionally good news story for Gawler. There's so many people involved in this project. Initially, I think it was looked at on as a burden. I think we can flip that, and we can tell a really good news story, because as you found, Adrian, there's lots of people that want to know what's going on, and the complexities. There's so many complexities. Just listening to Helen talk about burial practices, and the ad hoc nature of that in the 19th century, and what we're going to find, the artifacts that we're finding. I was actually thinking of Brian Thomas. He's still here. He's still here. He's still here. And he had it cleaned not that long ago. And no, he did it after that. when in one of his final throes of being an elected member, he got it cleaned. And it's black again. But, yeah, and that's just the nature of these memorials and these monuments. So yeah, I had the exact same thought as you, Helen. I thought the late great Brian Tom would be absolutely thrilled, because he really loved that monument, and it is an iconic piece of Gawler's heritage, but so's the wall and so's the cemetery. And I think all of that together is a fabulous story. So I think we can but we can craft a really lovely story that people will appreciate. And I think that this committee could assist in some of the negative comments that come out from the community, you know, build a car park, knock it down, all that sort of stuff. I think we can assist if people are interested. Once we do that good news story, that I would ask all of you to think of somebody who might be brave enough to write a comment in the Facebook site when we put it up, that actually says this is really important work. Because it is really important work, and we have to show leadership in fixing that wall, and we're finally going to do it, and it will be done absolutely properly and perfectly, I know, because you're in charge. And I think that, you know, no pressure at all, Wendy, but it is being done properly. As you said, you can't do any dig without the anthropologists being there, and that's right and proper. And so we have to celebrate that. And so I'm really quite keen to really make a big news story around how we're going about doing this and the importance of the history of Gawler, Light's vision, the whole thing, and poor record, you know, the Catholics were hopeless at it, but so were the Presbyterians, I think. So yeah, it really is an interesting story, and I think we can do it justice. Adrian.
Yeah, I also think when you look around the world, that they often do this sort of thing a lot better, and that they naturally involved archaeologists and anthropology and anthropologists and things like this, and we should be doing it. And this is probably the one that's going to point to that, because of all of those people that are buried underneath. And then when you look at the list, another thing I think, when you look at the list of people, how many young people there are, how many newly born babies and people under 5, people under 10, it really says something about what Gawler was and what was happening in those days. Yeah. Nice
Can I
to
ask a
see.
question, Wendy? Has there been consideration to a plaque being put on the wall, or some way of commemorating the people that were there?
Through the chair, not at this stage, but happy to, you know, take requests like that for consideration. I think there is the memorial in the park.
So I know about that one. I'm meaning on the footpath side of the wall. So people going past have a brief history of what happened once the wall has been reconstituted and the remains have been removed and so on. When the process is over, that there is something on the, as well as in the park, there's one on the footpath. That's what I mean.
Can I throw into the mix? Might not work. Brian was very keen for the wording of the McKinley Memorial, which is up very high and basically unreadable. He wanted that brought down to a more readable level. So perhaps we can, it's on the back, but seriously, you cannot, it's so high, and it's because it's engraved into the marble. We can't change it, but we could take the wording and add it into a sign somewhere, perhaps, to explain it. So I'd add that to your list of possibilities. But you could have an explanatory sign that shows people, and I think a lot of people will go and read that sign.
I think some sort of interp sign that has the chronology of how this thing developed and how we ended up with what we've got now and all the difficulties they had. Yeah, with.
You
Yeah,
might, you might want to edit that a little, because surprisingly, this will surprise you, Gawler's, it's been controversial for the last 150 years, and some of the ideas have seen council in court.
Okay. Have we exhausted our discussion on this particular item? Okay, thank you very much for all your input. Okay, so now we have a motion. Helen, did you have one for us?
Yes, thank you. I've roughly drafted it, but I'd invite some wordsmithing here. I would, so my wording says, the committee understands the challenges associated with the production and installation of the Walker Place artefacts and asks that staff negotiate for the installation to occur before December 2023. Sorry, if I need to repeat that, I can. The reason I'm saying before December 2023 is it would be fabulous for the oh no, it's the fringe I'm thinking of. No, it could be by the end of the year then. Sorry, I was getting my fringe and my Christmas mixed up. I don't know how I'm doing that. I'm just by the end of the year then.
Painful, isn't it?
By the end of 2023. Just thinking that perhaps in the fringe, we could bring attention to it. Understands the challenge of delivering and yep, that negotiate prior or before to occur before or by the end of 23, perhaps by the end of, rather than take the December out.
By the end of 2023. You don't need the word that between asks and staff either. People, you happy with that?
Happy with that?
People happy with that?
Is that
So-
okay, Wendy? Does that require, okay?
Okay, so Helen's moving it. Can we just Paul seconding it? Thank you. Any further discussion on that motion? Shelley? Yeah, we've got one. We've got one. Yeah. Okay. Those in favour, please show. Against, carried. Thank you, everyone. All right, our next meeting is the 8th of June. 5 o'clock. How about that? Oh,